Okay, here we go. Cheers, everybody. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week. And it's a really exciting time right now because after a long month, I would like to welcome back my co-host and my good friend, Oso's Hop Snack. Welcome back. Nothing makes watching government meetings, talking about government meetings, nothing makes it easier than a nice cold glass of Oso's Hop Snack, the most refreshing drink, Oso's. So, oh, by the way, Central Waters, I like HHG too. So, if you guys want to kick over some money for a sponsorship, I would be more than happy to drink some HHG too. No, nobody's sponsoring me. Nobody has to sponsor me. I'm going to drink regardless. Doesn't matter. You guys can save your money. So a lot to talk about tonight, and I'm going to try to just breeze through a lot of this. There wasn't much that happened in the city government this week. City government was pretty tame. It was laid back this month. The only thing that happened in city government was like some drama, and that happens a lot. It's been happening more and more frequently, it seems, between the mayor and Tori Jennings, our favorite number one district alder. So yeah, I mean, we had this city council meeting this week. Keith calls in and he wants to know why they're not meeting in person. And he's been calling in every month for like the last 3 or 4 months. And it's the same question every time. Why aren't you meeting in person? Why aren't you facing your constituents and facing the public eye to eye? Why are you still on Zoom? You all have your vaccines, presumably. So what's the holdup? The county has been allowing people to meet in person for a while already, and there's no answer, of course. So who knows how long it's going to be before these people get out and they start. I mean, look, if I were them, I wouldn't want to face people in public either. Let's face it. I'm looking forward to being able to attend these meetings in person. I won't go if I have to wear a mask. I mean, that's just how it is. I'm not going to sit there and it's bad enough just watching the meeting, but then having to do it while breathing in your own carbon dioxide the entire time. No, I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I think they're very happy and comfortable with the way things are going right now, especially with the emergence of the freedom fighters and the liberty leaders, the two groups that have kind of blown up over the last year. I think they don't want to have to deal with them in the same way that the county people have had to. Too bad, guys. Get out and meet in person. I agree with Keith. So Keith, keep calling in, keep bugging him. Everybody should keep bugging him. But that was really, Brock says it's time to get back in person and listen to their constituents. Yeah, well, I mean, to at least pretend to listen to their constituents, right? Like whether or not they actually listen to anybody, that's quite a different matter. I got plenty of people in my own district that will tell you that District 2, David Shore, doesn't give a shit about what you have to say. Okay, he's got his own thing going on, doesn't matter. So Ginger Keemer, who's like the newest member of the board, she basically comes on and uses her pre-council talk to talk about how the library, she's a librarian. I think she's a librarian. I'm pretty sure she's a librarian. She's talking about how the public library is no longer quarantining library materials. So I didn't know they were quarantining library materials. It just seems weird. So, I mean, basically the library, I guess, went just as mental over COVID as everybody else. So there was a big backlog, apparently, of library materials, and that's all going to be sorted out, and everybody's going to get caught up. Now, I remember seeing something a while ago where, remember that book, 50 Shades of Grey? Like it had a movie and everything. Now, like somebody had reported that you can just like go into any random library and pick up that book, and there was like like so much of a percentage that you were going to find like traces of cocaine in the book and stuff like that. That is worse than COVID, I would think. Well, no, I mean, it's cocaine. I guess cocaine's better than being sick, right? But look, like a lot of the stuff at the library, like I wouldn't want my kid reading that. Like I'd rather have them getting sick with COVID than reading half of the pop culture garbage they got floating around in the library. Josh, nice to see you. I got you on the big screen. You famous. Oh yeah. What about that MUA council person? I hear she hates white males. She hates cops, right? We know that. I don't know how much she hates white males, though. I think it's weird. So many people are afraid of freedom. I think it's absolutely, utterly bizarre. You would think that, the last 7,000 years of recorded human history would be enough for anybody to say, maybe this whole authoritarian thing doesn't work out too well. The whole enslaving people and constantly going to war against people and stealing people's stuff. Maybe that's not the best idea. Here we have a situation where in 200 years of freedom, essentially, of people being able to, and lefties aren't going to like this, but capitalism, right along with it, has produced more in 200 years in terms of freedom, in terms of comfort, yeah, in terms of degeneracy and laziness and stupidity as well, sure, but all of the good things that people take for granted, all of this stuff came about in like 200 years. In the 200 years of Renaissance, that is the idea that individuals like you and me are like fully like self-determining, right? And that we can own property in the sense that no matter how rich or powerful you are, like even the king, if we were still ruled by a king, would not be allowed to come onto your property if you didn't want him there. For how many thousands of years of human history was this just something that people would have never ever dreamed of? And it is only because of this stuff that we've been as successful as a society as we are. And it's the only reason that we've been as rich as we are, that we become as wealthy as we are. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, there's no way that I would give up electricity and being able to go to a grocery store and get food to achieve some kind of like communist dream. Like I would never ever want to go there. But there's a lot of people that think that there's something good there. Apparently, war and genocide and starvation, and I guess all that stuff's preferable to a lot of the people, especially in Stephen's Point, than being wealthy and being free. I don't understand it. But anyway, I got sidetracked. So Ginger Keemer is talking about the library and just all the things that the library is doing. And to be perfectly honest, like I just didn't even think the library even existed anymore as a thing. Now, as a kid, I used to freaking love the library. Like I used to go there all the time, and there were so many cool things. That's where you could get the Star Wars and Doctor Who expanded universe novels. I used to get stuff like that all the time. And you could get the books on tape, like the little, they'd take Gremlins and movies like that and put them on a cassette tape, and like all that stuff was like super awesome. But I mean, like I feel like the emergence of things like Goodwill and Amazon and stuff like that, like I don't know. Do you guys use the library? I guess like I haven't in years, and it's just because if I want a book, I just order it on Amazon, or I'll find reading material at Goodwill or wherever else. I haven't even been to the library in a very long time. So it was just weird to me that she's talking about the library, and I was just like, man, it seems like the only people that even use the library anymore are like homeless people, like to go to the bathroom or to like wash up a little bit. Like the last time I was at the library, that's all that seemed to be in there, or people that would just go in there just to use like the internet and stuff. So I don't know. Sadly, I think I think the library is just kind of on its way out, as sad as that is. But like, there's so many online resources where you can get books and stuff for free. And I feel like the difference between like the library and what's available now is like the difference between like Netflix and network TV. Like, who watches network TV anymore? There's like not a huge audience that does anymore. People, they like streaming services and YouTube and things like that. And, like, I look at the library kind of fondly because I used to go there all the time, but kind of in the same way that I kind of like have a little bit of nostalgia for network TV. Like, I used to watch like Knight Rider and Full House and shows like that when I was a kid, or like The Simpsons. But like, I would never want to go back there when I can just like stream or torrent everything nowadays. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I just made note of her comments on the library because it just struck me as weird that like the library is still out there and it's still a thing. But that's just my own dumb thing that I had to throw in there, I guess. So the other thing that happened in city council was there was a presentation given by some university students about this like photoelectric lighting that is part of like the smart city apparatus that more and more cities are starting to adopt. And like, apparently we have one in this town too, somewhere downtown. I'll have to go look for it, but the mayor had mentioned that. But basically they're just light posts that turn on like when vehicles are in like a certain proximity, and they have internet connections, and they can issue announcements. Like, they can just do all kinds of things, and it's all part of like the whole smart city idea. Like, if you don't know what that is, it's basically just using a lot of technology, like actually within the infrastructure of a city, to generate a lot of information. They're basically like these hives of information. They're like these information dumps. And of course, the reason they do it is because they want information on like traffic flow, and like all this stuff is supposed to help build cities better. Now, like, we know governments like this because it becomes like a big revenue hive, essentially. Like, there's nothing you can do within the city that isn't going to be logged somewhere by a central computer. And like, this isn't far off, really. In 40 more years, every city on Earth is going to look like this. I have no doubt about it, barring, like the apocalypse or something like that. It's going to happen. So the mayor was really excited to talk about how we have one of these light posts here, and we're on our way into the future. I mean, he didn't say that, but yeah. And so they gave a presentation on this, and I mean, it wasn't really like anything that I took away from it, just because I know about all this stuff already. But we are going to start implementing stuff like this. So this is something to look forward to, because the city of Stevens Point will start doing this eventually, where they're just going to start implementing more and more of these smart city apparatus within the town of Stevens Point. So, and again, governments love this because eventually it will be used as a control mechanism. I mean, we know how this stuff works. Every little bit of technology always gets co-opted by the government at some point to be able to control people, right? Where is the current light post? Rosalind wants to know. It's somewhere downtown. The mayor just said downtown. I meant to like send an email to Karnofsky and ask him where it was exactly, because I want to go check it out, but I just never got around to it. But I will do that this week. I will go look at it because I'm curious. I want to see what it looks like. The actual city council meeting itself, it was just full of drama. There's literally nothing to talk about in this council meeting except the drama, again, between Tori Jennings and the mayor. So it starts off, she immediately wants a couple of items pulled from the consent agenda. And like, the consent agenda is basically just everything that the committees and the boards did in the 2 weeks leading up to the city council meeting. And that's basically just to say, they're like the minutes from these meetings. And that's just to say, here's all the minutes. The council has to approve it, and then it gets stuck, in a drawer somewhere, I guess, and just disappears. So Tori wanted to pull the minutes from the Board of Public Works, like one of the Board of Public Works meetings, and then there was a preliminary review of a developer who wants to put 39 lots on a plot of land out on Gala Road or Avenue or whatever it is, the one behind Fleet Farm, you know where it is. And these are two things that she really doesn't like. Like, she doesn't like this development at all, this development idea, because it flies in the face of her. Like, she's a big, strong towns proponent, and she doesn't like this. So she does this, and basically she doesn't like, with the public works thing, she doesn't like that the mayor chairs the Board of Public Works. And she does this every time, like after every election, there's like kind of like a redoing of all the committees and like who sits on what committee and all that. And the last 2 years, she's complained about the mayor chairing some of these, she calls them more important committees. None of them are that important. Come on, right? But she accuses the mayor of like doing some kind of power grab. Like, he sits on these chairs because he's grabbing power. Now, I mean, we're not conquering nations here. I don't know how much power you're grabbing in a city of less than 40,000 just by chairing a public works committee. So, I mean, like, honestly, Tori, if a public works chair is your idea of a power grab, then you got to aim higher in life, because that is nothing. That's such a dumb thing to get upset about. I mean, she's got this whole weird thing about like power dynamics, and she often accuses Wiesa of exercising his power unfairly or unjustly or whatever. So yeah, I mean, whatever. So she pushes to take a vote on getting the mayor's appointment to the chair, basically to get him off the chair. Look, and she does this all the time. And honestly, nobody on the city council like cares about this at all. She seems to be the only one who like really cares. And, you know, apparently the board itself isn't smart enough to just appoint who they want. So they need, you know, Tori Jennings, motherly wisdom to come in there and make sure everybody does what they're supposed to do according to her. So they vote to deny him the chair. The vote basically goes down in flames. There were 4 people who voted for it: Jennings, Shore, Melissa Johnson, of course, because they're the 3. They always kind of, you know, team up and help each other out with votes like this. Dalton voted to deny it. And basically she was just kind of like, well, okay, fine. I'll go along with this. Just whatever, because it's such a dumb thing. And, so then the other thing that she got bent out of shape was this lot that they're trying to build on Gala behind Fleet Farm. And like her thing is like, she tried to make it about the strong towns thing, but like I don't think anybody really cares about that too much. So then it becomes an issue of like trying to get along with the town of Hull. Like, it's about diplomacy, and she's trying to make it like the city of Stevens Point is just trying to like grab land and it's pissing off the people in Hull. But Mary Kneebone comes in and she points out that this isn't like a land grab. The developer came to the city about building these lots because the developer wants the Stevens Point infrastructure, because they're going to have to provide all like the water and sewage lines to this development and everything else. So it's not like the city of Stevens Point's just going in and like annexing this stuff. The developer came to the city. And that's really how it should be. Like, honestly, I don't care what the town of Hull has to say about how somebody else uses the property. I don't care what Stevens Point has to say about how somebody else uses the property. But the reason things like this turn into like these big fights is because you got these people in these little fiefdoms, you know, town of Hull and Stevens Point, who want the tax base. That's basically what they're fighting over. They're fighting over the taxes. Like, it shouldn't concern them at all. And in a free society, completely where you're left alone and you're not being extorted by one entity or another, like this wouldn't even be an issue. Nobody would care. But because this is all about taxes, everybody's got to like fight about it. And it's a stupid thing, but whatever. And so again, they take a vote on it, and nothing comes of it. It's just, Tori reminds me of Grandpa Simpson. Like you've seen the meme where he's like shaking his fists and like cursing a cloud in the sky. Like that's kind of how it all seems. And like there's nothing really substantial behind it. Like she's not citing any real abuses of power here. She's just like, she doesn't like how things are playing out. It's just a personal preference thing with her. So that's it. It was just some drama between Tori and the mayor. Nothing really that interesting. Josh, who are these people? They don't represent their constituents. Why do people get involved in local government, right? They have grand ideas for how things are supposed to work, at least inside their own heads, and they get involved with local government because they want to be the person in charge of implementing those grand ideas. Yeah, they don't, like David Shore doesn't. To be fair, no other individual represents me or you, right? Like it's not a president. It doesn't matter if you like the person or not, right? Like I like Pat Teston, but he doesn't represent my views in the state Senate, half the time. And that's the thing. Like a lot of people like the idea of like representative democracy. I'm neither here nor there with it because unless I give somebody a specific task coming from me myself, like I don't consider anybody to represent me. David Shore is not my representative. He doesn't represent anything I have to say or anything that I think. And that goes for Katrina Shankland and Pat Teston and Ron Johnson and Joe Biden. Like none of these people represent me in any sense of the word. I represent me. Josh wants to know why I didn't swear. Oh, I don't know. I swear sometimes on the stream. I say shit, right? This isn't it's a PG-13 stream, I think. YouTube always wants to know if the stream is for kids, and I always check the no, it's not for kids, definitely, because kids are just going to find it boring anyway. But yeah, it's just one of these. It's one of these like weird little power plays and power dynamics that happen in like city government all the time. And it's just so stupid. Like the last week, I talked about how people should be like Tori Jennings and the mayor, a perfect example here. Yeah, they're always button heads. Like, why don't they just go and like fight to the death, and like the winner, the victor gets to take the public works board chair, like that's the big that would be the big like reward for your victory. Like who do you think would win in a fight with Mayor Wiesa and Tori Jennings, like in a fight to the death? Chime in on the comments. I want to hear the answers. I think it would be Tori Jennings. And the mayor's bigger, obviously, he's got the weight behind him and all of that. But like, I feel like Tori has more stamina because she's always biking. And like I feel like she just has like so much like resentment and bitterness and hate built up that she would be one of those people that would just, you would turn her loose and she would just start, clawing the mayor's face off and he wouldn't even know where to start. I've always thought that I could never do like any kind of like boxing or UFC or anything like that, because like I'm the type of person who has to like I can't just hype myself up to fight. Like somebody has to hit me first or something. Like somebody has to do something to piss me off before I could actually fight. But I don't feel like that would be the same thing with Tori Jennings. Like I think she'd be like ready to go the second you dropped her in a ring with the mayor, and she'd be like a wild cat, and you wouldn't like just clawing you to pieces, and you wouldn't like even know what to do with a person. You couldn't even fight a person like that. That's how they should settle their disputes, or at least with a duel or something. Like duels always seemed like such a good idea. I wonder why they ever got rid of them. Okay, so the big news this week was the county board resolution thing, right? Uh, so they brought a resolution before the county board, and they wanted the county board to resolve, or well, no, to declare that they were going to protect everybody's rights as guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, by the Constitution. And if you followed this to any degree, if you watched it, it's pretty clear that, there's a lot of people in this area that like hate freedom for some reason. And I don't understand it. Like, I don't get what people have against the Bill of Rights. Mua, for instance, she offered like an amendment to it saying that, well, I would vote for this, but only if we amended it to say, especially marginalized people and minorities and blah, blah, blah. And like, that's her thing. She's supposed to be the person who like speaks out for people like that. But even she voted against it at the end. And like, it astonishes me that people can look at like rights. They can look at a document that says you have the right to free speech and to assemble and to avoid searches and seizures, and that the federal government can't just arbitrarily do anything that it wants. And you had people vote against that. And not only that, but you had a lot of people like get up and speak against that. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Really? And I'm going to touch on some of the arguments here because I watched this thing through. I couldn't believe half of what these people were saying. It didn't make any sense to me. But here's the thing about a lot of people on the political left. They are generally not like reasonable people. They're not rational people. Now, obviously, you're going to have exceptions to that. But by and large, they are people that are governed purely by emotion. Not purely. There's like a little bit of like logic that goes in there, but for the most part, they are very emotionally driven people. And so, I saw a lot of the people that stood up and spoke, and they tried. The problem with doing that is you're trying to appeal to their reason. Okay. So you had people stand up and say, well, this is why you're wrong about this. It doesn't work with people on the left. Like, and I've found this out after years and years and years of, debating with a lot of like my own friends that are on the left. It doesn't work that way. They just don't, you just can't appeal to their use of logic and reason. And so to stand up and by the way, I'm not bagging on anybody who did do that. I'm just saying, like, for the future, if you want to it's all about propaganda, right? It's all about marketing. It's all about how you present something. If you want to make any headway with these people, you have to appeal to them on an emotional level. They just don't. And that's why you can't call them out for being hypocrites because to be a hypocrite, you have to be holding two philosophically, logically inconsistent ideas at the same time. But if you deny the use of logic and reason in your thinking process, then it doesn't work. It's completely powerless. So I would just advise people for the future, when you are trying to get stuff like this passed, appeal to their reason, appeal to their sense of morality or their sense of justice. That's how I have ever been successful converting people from the left to my way of thinking. Because all I have to say is, well, you don't really believe in justice and peace for anybody as long as you believe in government, because the very existence of government undermines what you're trying to accomplish. Government is premised on violence. It is premised on sticking a gun into somebody's face and forcing them to do what you want them to do, right? Libertarianism is all premised upon the non-aggression principle. When you go at them at the way they think about, at their political worldview from that angle, and not say, well, we need rights because of all of these wonderful good things that having rights give us, right? It doesn't work with them. So anyway, just a side note, I wanted to throw that out there to give you guys something to think about for next time, because there will be a next time. I hope there will be a next time. Get up in front of all these meetings and boards and committees and councils and keep pushing for this stuff, because it's good stuff. And I think it's a good way to educate people. Like a lot of the people who were part of the constitutional resolution really got involved, and I think a lot of them learned a lot about how government works and how most of the people just they don't care about what you have to say about it. They're going to ignore you. I think that's a good lesson for anybody to learn. I learned that very much during my days of Ron Paul campaigning, and it's a bit of a disillusioning thing to see, but people need that. People need to know that. So I guess my initial takeaway is that in the end, it didn't matter, right? Like whether they passed it or they rejected it, it ultimately wasn't going to matter. And, there was a fight over whether or not the word pledge should be in there as opposed to declare. And I understood why they were trying to do that. But again, in the end, it really didn't matter. And here's why. Because can you imagine anybody on that county board, with a few exceptions, obviously Scott Soik is an exception, but can you imagine any of these people ever standing up for your rights, ever, like constitutional resolution or not? Like it's not going to happen. Can you imagine somebody like two of the people I'm going to talk about tonight, Dennis Robbie and Mildred Neville? Can you imagine either one of them like picking up a gun and fighting back, to defend the county against bad people? I can't imagine that. However, everybody on the other side of this debate would absolutely do that. And so, again, it just comes back to, like, those of you who know me personally know I'm not like a big fan of like political action for the most part, because I think it's mostly useless, because I think people themselves, individuals themselves, are either good or bad. Individuals themselves are either going to defend liberty or not, and government is just a tool to either defend liberty or to take it from people. And so individuals are what matter. It's not really government policy that matters so much to me. And this is just kind of an example of that. Like the people in like the Freedom Fighters group and the Liberty Leaders group, the people that were kind of behind showing up at these meetings, those are the people that are going to ultimately defend liberty in any real sense. It will not be the Dennis Robbies and the Mildred Nevilles of the world. It just isn't. They're perfectly happy sitting on their boards and espousing their own opinions, dumb opinions, and that's as far as it will ever take them. They'll never do anything of substance as far as defending rights. So, that's just one thing I thought of while I was kind of like going through this. But if nothing else, it exposed all of these weak little like political creepy crawlies that just kind of infest this entire area, right? Because so many people came out to, speak against it. They're like prairie dogs. They just pop up when somebody starts talking about rights, and they're like, how dare you? And then they go scurry off into their little holes again. And there was a lot of people on the board that did that. And there was a lot of members of the public that did that kind of treated this that way. So, I mean, when it comes down to it, like, I don't want anybody building any government around me anyway. But, if anybody's going to do it, I'm going to trust the guys who basically fought the largest empire on earth and sent them packing back over the seas and wrote a constitution to make sure that it never happened again. I will trust those people to build a government over the Robbies and the Nevilles of the world, okay? They have their own weird ideas about what government should be doing, and I just don't trust them. I don't think they have really ever earned the right to even talk about things like that, to talk about what rights I should have or what rights you should have. What have they done to ever earn the right to speak like that? The guys who picked up guns and shot redcoats, they kind of earned that right a little bit, right? At least a little bit. So, all right, let's catch up on some of these comments here. Josh says, it's what I always say when it comes to diversity. Is diversity based on who we are as individuals, or is it based on visual character? It's always based on what you got between your legs and what color your skin is. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. Rye 55. The founders would have had them working in the kitchen. Yeah, they would have. These people are they would have been like the water people, gathering water for the troops or something. They probably wouldn't have even been anywhere near like a battlefield had they lived back then. But so all the people that came up to speak in opposition to this resolution were clearly all people who just have no interest in trying to understand the other side. Here's what I guaranteed happened. A lot of these people are like members of the Democratic Party, and they have their little gatherings and their get-togethers, and they talk amongst themselves on Facebook. And somebody told them that this was something bad and they should reject it, right? And that's why they showed up to do it. It's not like they gave any thought to this whatsoever. Now, I can look at this objectively, and, like my first question that I would ask is, why do people want a resolution like this passed? Like that would be the first thing I asked myself. What's the purpose behind this? What is it that is going on with these people that they feel like they need to pass a resolution? That'd be my first. And the fact of the matter is that we now live in a country, and we live in a community even, that has zero value for liberty, for property rights, for self-determination, for any of it. And that is happening at every single level of government. And so what I saw from the people that showed up to try and get this resolution passed were people that were concerned by this trend to control every aspect of people's lives. And all they wanted was assurances from their local government that they weren't going to be party to this, right? That's all they wanted. All they wanted was the assurance. And like it seemed like nobody who spoke in opposition to that even addressed that issue. They were just like, oh, here's some crazy right-wingers. They must be, racists and whatever else they get called all the time. And that's it. That's as far as their entire thinking process went. That was it. And you have to ask, well, why do people feel the need to even think that their local government wasn't going to defend these rights? Like, it didn't just come out of a vacuum. We just went through a year where government bureaucrats ruled by fiat, right? You had businesses shut down, you had people losing their jobs, you got the entire population masked and locked down. And out of all of it, there was no recourse for anybody, none whatsoever. You were basically treated like a slave for a year. And to be fair, it wasn't that bad here in Portage County. A lot of other places had it a lot worse. However, the precedent was set. We saw this happen. There was very little opposition to it. And we wanted to make sure I shouldn't say it. I had nothing to do with the resolution. I had no part in it whatsoever. But like, I'm definitely on their side for sure for doing what they were trying to do, and cheered them on. What they were trying to do is make sure that we have this precedent now where government can basically just do whatever the hell they want. And as long as it's an emergency, as long as everybody's scared to death, most people are just going to go right along with it, right? Same thing happened with commies and the war on terror and the satanic panic of the 90s. And like, you just have to scare people enough and government will sweep in and save the day. That's what it's about. All these people wanted was somebody to say, we're going to make sure that none of this is going to happen in this area. That's all they were looking for. But lo and behold, it's shocking how many people oppose freedom of speech and keeping the government at bay. They would have been fillers of the founders' fountain pens. Yeah, if they could figure out how they worked. I don't think half of these people are smart enough to do that. So, a lot of these people showed up. Like the big argument was, this is redundant. Yeah. Nothing was more redundant in all of these meetings than that stupid redundant argument that people kept saying over and over and over again. And that's how it occurred to me that this wasn't just a bunch of people coming out and speaking their minds. Propaganda when you hear it. And this was obviously somebody who told somebody that this is what you get up in the meeting and you say. You use the word redundant, and that's the magical word. And it's not even an argument. So I don't even know what people were thinking they were going to accomplish with it. Because just saying something's redundant doesn't mean that the redundancy you're implementing is good or bad, right? Like it doesn't make that case. So people just kept getting up and saying, this is redundant. This is redundant. We already have a constitution, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but so what? It's not like the Constitution ceased to exist in a place like Michigan, and they were locked. They're still locked down to this day. Or California, or all these other places where all these horrible things happen. It's not as though the Constitution ceased to exist in Portage County. I mean, there are so many unconstitutional laws that get enacted or enforced, even right here in Portage County. So just saying something is redundant is completely meaningless because the enforcement is surely not redundant, or whether it's the enforcement or even the protection of your rights. Like that doesn't happen. Like nobody cares. Brock says, John Honell, the Constitution isn't set in stone. Your rights aren't guaranteed. That's why you have rifles, Joan. And I know she's probably a big anti-gun person on top of it. It was shocking how many people got up and said things. Oh, well, first of all, they tried to make this all about the Second Amendment. So Scott Soik got accused of trying to push some crazy behind-the-scenes agenda because he's a gunsmith. And so apparently they thought he was trying to push this Constitution resolution as a way of defending his gun business or something. It was something so dumb and conspiratorial. But it is set in stone, Joan. See, that's the problem with written documents. The Constitution is not just some quaint idea. It's not just a bunch of guys that got together and they were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if government ran like this? That's not how it is. It is a legal document. A legal document. And I don't think a lot of the people that spoke even realize that. They look at the Constitution like some kind of resolution. Like it was just the founders getting together to pass some resolution that left everything open to interpretation. No. There were years of debate before the Constitution, after the Revolutionary War, before the Constitution was even adopted, because people didn't trust having a Constitution, having a federal government back then. The reason things get written down, Joan, is because people want to make things very clear and make things very understandable. A perfect example of, everybody kept bringing up the Second Amendment because they wanted to be able to take your guns away at some point. Of course, they will deny that this is the end game. It absolutely is, and everybody knows it, and we all see it coming from a mile away. But this is why they want you to think that way, because they want you to think that we are the officials and we can change the Constitution at our leisure. And there's nothing you can do about it, essentially. That's her view of government. That's her view of the Constitution. She doesn't understand that it is a legal document between the federal government and the states. And at any time, the states can walk away from that agreement. One of the things that Dennis Robbie said too, kind of along these terms, is that he doesn't like it because he thinks that whatever the state government and the federal government says is the ultimate authority, right? Whatever laws they pass, that's what we have to abide by. That's his view. And again, that is not the view of American history. That is not the view of the Constitution. It's funny because in 1850, there was a well-known case of a runaway slave by the name of Jacob Glover, I want to say, who ran away from his farm or whatever in Missouri, and he made his way to Wisconsin. And at the time, there was something called the Fugitive Slave Act, and federal marshals would go out and they would track down runaway slaves and they would drag them back to the plantations that they came from. Well, so this happened in Wisconsin, and basically what happened was they put this guy in a jail in Milwaukee, the federal marshals did, and the people in Milwaukee at the time were, like a lot of them were abolitionists, and there was a guy, Sherman, I think his last name was, and he was like a big abolitionist, and he was like a newspaper guy, and he was always preaching abolition. At the time, Wisconsin just wasn't, they weren't a slave state, none of the northern states were. So they broke into the jail, they freed this guy, and they sent him to Canada via the Underground Railroad. Now, the Sherman guy was arrested, okay, for doing this because he had basically, it was equivalent of stealing somebody's property. Like human beings can be property, right? And so it went to the court, and the state courts found him not guilty, and they released him because the thinking in Wisconsin was, hey, it's just the Fugitive Slave Act is just an unconstitutional act. We're simply not going to enforce it. That was the thing. The federal government disagreed, and it went to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court also said, yeah, we think this is unconstitutional. We're not going to, and it is, by the way, the Fugitive Slave Act was 100% unconstitutional. There's no reason that federal marshals should have been in Wisconsin arresting black people. In Dennis Robbie's world, he thinks that Jacob Glover should have gone back to his plantation. In the Dennis Robbie world, in the Mildred Neville world, in the Joan Honnold or however you pronounce her name, in their world, Jacob Glover should have gone back to slavery. That's what they're saying, essentially. When they try to tell me that rights are just a matter of government opinion, I find that offensive. I have rights to speak, to assemble, to do whatever the hell I want, as long as I'm not infringing on the rights of another human being. I have those rights by virtue of me being here, alive, a human being. I have a mouth. I can talk. I can say whatever I want. I can buy a gun. I can buy any kind of gun. I can basically do whatever I want. Okay, that's the thing. And for people like these to come along and say, well, no, you can't. We will decide for you what you can and cannot do. And by the way, this is a big gripe I have with Republicans and a lot of conservatives too, because a lot of them also fall into like the same trap of thinking they should be able to decide for other people what they can and cannot do. And I find that highly offensive. But what they did in this meeting was they vocalized it, and they said, your rights are, yeah, you can write them on pieces of paper, but I will decide. Political opinion will decide what rights you do and don't have. And for you to come here and dare to claim that you have rights, it drives them crazy because they don't understand what rights are. You either have rights or you have privileges. Like there's no difference. Mildred and Dennis Robbie and Joan, whatever, they all think you have privileges. In their world, rights do not exist for anybody. You are only allowed to do what you do on their say-so and not any more than that. And if you try to do any more than that, they'll, send the enforcers after you, whatever. So, Wisconsin back in 1850, when that whole thing happened with Jacob Glover, was just one, like that's our own personal history from here in Wisconsin. People in Wisconsin didn't always used to be these groveling, bootlicking, spineless little worms like a lot of those people that showed up for the council meeting or the board meeting, or a lot of the people sitting on the board. It actually used to be filled with people who respected the rights of others to the point of breaking a dude out of jail. That's amazing. That's what heroes are made of. Not people like the people I just mentioned, Mildred and Dennis and them, who just basically sit there and tell you, who have earned no right to rule you whatsoever, and will sit there and tell you that your rights are dependent on my opinion. Those people offer nothing to society. They offer nothing to free human society. They sit in their cushy board chairs and dictate to others. They can go to hell. Honestly, that's all I have to say about it. They don't rule me. They can pretend to all they want, but it's just that. That's just their imagination. And so, yeah, like the other thing was that the founders went back and forth so many times. You can find it in the Dennis Robbie. Here is your reading assignment. The Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. Read them all, okay? Don't you dare come into a public meeting and tell me that I have to grovel before the state and federal authorities on their say-so, or that you can't do certain things because your hands are tied by the state and federal authorities. Don't you dare tell me that until you finished your reading assignment. Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, back and forth on exactly what the Constitution allowed and what it didn't allow. The Constitution didn't allow about 99.99% of all the things the federal government does today. Okay? It doesn't. It was never intended to do that. In fact, the Alien and Sedition Act, I think Adams was president, where they were basically they said you weren't allowed to criticize the president. You couldn't talk bad about the federal government. They were literally locking journalists up in prison for it. Well, what happened was that the states of Virginia and Kentucky got together and basically came out with the Kentucky resolution. I think Kentucky kind of gets the name for it, but the resolutions basically said that, no, the states are in a contract with the federal government, a legally binding contract. And since we are one party to this contract, we also get to decide the terms of the contract. You would never, ever, ever enter into a contract with somebody who got to decide how to interpret the contract, right? You would, like any intelligent person would, that's a bad deal for anybody. There's no way in hell that the states would have done that back then. They'd probably do it nowadays because there's a lot of dumb people out there. But back then, people were at least a little more intelligent than they are today. They basically said, no, we can determine what is constitutional. The states can determine what is constitutional and what isn't. The Supreme Court can make all the declaration it wants, but they don't then translate into laws that the states are in any way obligated to. Okay, that's not how it works. One of them had even referenced, I can't remember who it was, but one of them even referenced the Supreme Court. They said something to the effect of, oh, do you think that the states should be able to just decide not to enforce Supreme Court ruling? Yeah, that was the point. That was exactly what the point was at the beginning. Like, how is it in any way fair that the federal government determines what the limits of the federal government's power are? That doesn't make any sense. Again, you would never enter into a contract like that. So again, these are just ignorant people who they don't even know their own history. So anybody who was making an argument to that end, saying that, you know, this is all just a matter of opinion, and like Mildred Neville said that a lot. Oh, we all have different views on things, and we have to, you know, we disagree. And basically she was saying that where the disagreements happen, then it just becomes a matter of who can amass the most people to use the greater amount of force and violence against the other side to impose their will. That's essentially what she was trying to say. I don't think she was trying to say that, but that's exactly, when you break down all of the fluff, and this happens with a lot of like leftist philosophy. When you break down all of their stupid fluff about diversity and differences of opinion, and like we all deserve to have our voices heard, it's all bullshit. Like I think a lot of you who follow the stream know that it's all bullshit. But it is. It's just self-righteous nonsense. Like none of it translates into the real world at all. Basically, what they're saying is that we should all have like a civilized conversation about how I want to oppress you. That's essentially what they're saying. But in the end, it all comes back to the guns of government being pointed at you and telling you what to do. So, so Joan saying that, again, back to you, Barack. I know you kind of started the whole thing off saying that things aren't set in stone, even with the Constitution. She's not wrong, okay? But there's a process for changing the Constitution. And the process is not an easy one, which is why the Constitution's just been completely ignored, at least for the last 100 years, right? Because there is no, nobody wants to go through all the work it takes to change an amendment. So they did that with like prohibition. Because back then, back in the 20s, in order for the federal government to have any authority whatsoever over the distribution of alcohol, they knew even back then, like 100 years ago, they still knew that they had to change the Constitution to give themselves the authority to do that. Didn't work out so well to them. Basically gave rise to all of the worst people in society. I shouldn't say the worst people. I mean, yeah, it gave rise to the people like the Al Capones and stuff, but it was during the Depression, and at least Al Capone was like feeding people too. Like he had his soup kitchens and he was doing a lot of good in the community. Whatever, but it didn't work out too well, and they all became very powerful and more powerful than the governments in a lot of the local governments in a lot of instances. New York and Chicago were notoriously run by the mobs back then, and so they ended up changing it eventually. But we have other prohibitions, right? We have prohibitions on drugs today. Nobody bothered even passing an amendment to give the federal government the authority to ban marijuana, or like I don't even care how bad of a drug it is. The federal government had zero authority to ever ban it. Heroin's a pretty crappy drug. Doesn't mean the federal government should ban it. They just don't have authority to do that. It's not in the Constitution. So yeah, in one sense, it's not written in stone. There is a process to change it. But if you're not going to go through the process to change it, then yes, it's set in stone, and there's nothing you can do about it. The other thing I got a kick out of was the people who were just like, there was a lot of people who made this about the Second Amendment. That's what it came down to, because nothing scares people on the left more than guns. And okay, you have to understand what this was all about. Like this wasn't about like you and your rights per se. I think what it revealed was that a lot of the people that were speaking out against it, they were speaking from a place of their own paranoia, from a place of their own like anger, their own ignorance, their own lack of empathy for their fellow human beings. And I know they like to really present themselves as being empathetic people. Most of them are just self-centered and self-righteous. And a lot of this stuff came out, and like it's not very flattering either. But I don't think I'm being disingenuous here either. I think they were just speaking from a place of paranoia and fear. You saw a lot of accusations flying around, especially with Vinny, accusing Scott. There was one particularly dumb thing. I didn't write it down or anything, but so I'm paraphrasing here. But he was saying something to the effect of, "Oh, Soik has political ambitions, and that's why he's pushing this," or something to that effect. And I'm just like, Vinny, dude, you're sitting on the county board. You have political ambitions. You are a politician. What the hell are you talking about here? It didn't even seem to occur to him, though, that, well, maybe this is a little bit of, the kettle calling the pot black or whatever, but like, what a bizarre thing to say. They're all just like, they've completely lost their minds in a lot of these instances. But anyway, like, a lot of them were talking about like the Second Amendment. They didn't like the Second Amendment stuff, which, by the way, is an example of why you need the council reaffirming your rights, because the Second Amendment's a perfect example of how a government that had no authority to do anything with guns whatsoever decided to, and why did they do it? Like, back in the 60s, why did they start doing this? Why did they start regulating guns? Because people like the Black Panthers were arming themselves and standing, like, going into government build, like in California especially, and that scared the shit out of people. And so again, scared people started clamoring for laws for, the government to step in and start regulating firearms, and it all happened because of that. And the Black Panthers were right? They should absolutely be free to carry weapons, and like even into a government building. But I mean, that's just, you might disagree with that. That's my libertarianism leaking out again, I guess. But the amount of people that said things like, "Oh, I support the Second Amendment. I go hunting." I mean, I hate to be the one to point this out, but the Second Amendment is about killing human beings. The Second Amendment is not about shooting deer for venison. It's about killing human beings. Lefties don't like to hear that, but when you cut away all of the, and like, this is an issue that conservatives like dance around because they don't want to come out that harsh. They don't, a lot of times they don't want to just call it for what it is, but essentially that's what it is. It's about killing government agents that show up to try to take your guns. That's what the Second Amendment is for. And yeah, maybe that sounds harsh, but that's it. That's the reality of it. So all these people that tried to say that, they try to make it about like gun hunting, again, you're not getting it. I mean, like, really, you think like the founders in an era where most people had to hunt for their food, who just came off like this huge war, you really think they were talking about like hunting? Really? Again, that's more ignorance of history. And you see that over and over again. Like I said at the beginning, these people are not thinkers. They're not philosophers. They're not even curious about like why the Constitution even exists and why it says the things that it says, right? Like that, like it doesn't even occur to them that maybe there's a Second Amendment because there's a reason. And the reason isn't for people to go and shoot up schools. That's not the reason for it. Those people are criminals. People who do that are murderers, and they should be dealt with appropriately. The Second Amendment's about shooting government agents, not school kids. But again, this is all of this is just coming from their own paranoia and fear, and it's just really bizarre. They're again, I'm gonna keep saying this. They're not rational people. They're essentially the government, or like the government version of, well, I shouldn't even just limit it to the board members, like the members of the public too would also fall in here. They are the adult equivalent of children who think that there are monsters under their bed. They're completely emotionally stunted in some way, that they're living just in this world of fear and panic, and all of the crazy accusations from members of the board who are like, whoa, what are you trying to accomplish with this? There's something shady going on here. What, you people want your rights? How dare you? What are you really up to? I mean, that was another thing that kept coming up in the board meeting. And I'm just like, you have to be such a lost, emotionally stunted, intellectually stunted human being to even process your entire world in that way, where everything is a conspiracy against you, where everybody's, trying to do something behind the scenes to push an agenda that you don't like. Only a politician would really think that way. When I look at the people who supported this resolution, they're not politicians. They are people who want the guarantee from their own local government that you're going to defend their rights, nothing more. And all the people that opposed them were freaking children and nothing more. Just these emotionally stunted, intellectually lazy, uncurious children who think that monsters still live under their beds. And that's why most of them were, wearing masks too, probably. But there was the one guy, the old bald guy, like I don't remember what his name was, but he tried to give a talk to the freedom fighter people that were there and the liberty leader people that were there. And he was like, your group is, you're appealing to people's fear, and that's not what government is for. We need reason. We can't live in this world of emotion. The guy's speaking with a mask on his face. The guy literally thinks if he doesn't have this muzzle on his face, he's going to get COVID. This idiot. And he's trying to lecture other people there about government is all about reason and not emotion. You moron. That's the other thing about a lot of these people. They just have no sense of self-awareness whatsoever. None. And it's funny to watch. Vinny has no self-awareness apparently. Bald mask COVID guy trying to lecture the freedom fighters has no self-awareness. Rye 55 says they're morons and have zero place in any kind of power over others. I know. And of course, I would argue nobody has any place having power of any kind over other people. But that's neither here nor there. I know I'm not getting anywhere with that argument. I understand that the things are the way they are, whether I like it or not. But so the only board member, oh my God, this is way over an hour already. I'll wrap it up right here. The one board member who didn't speak out from this childlike view of the world was Dave Medine. Okay. He voted against the resolution, yes, but he was doing it the reason he gave was not because he was scared of guns or he was scared of hidden agendas or he was scared of because he didn't think the Constitution doesn't guarantee rights, that it's just like an open book and we all get to decide for you what your rights are. That's not why he voted against it. The only statement he made is he said, I'm here to represent these people. These people blew up my phone and said to vote against it. And he gave the reasons. And yeah, the reasons he gave were dumb. They were all the same dumb reasons that I talked about here. But at the same time, what do you got to do? You got to vote the way your constituents want, right? I mean, if you're going to make any case for, representative democracy, which I think is stupid and a sham and everything else, but at least that's what he's doing, right? And I don't know his personal opinions on the resolution. I mean, if you live in his district, shoot him an email or give him a call. Apparently he takes calls from his constituents and he listens to them and find out whether he actually agreed with it or not. That wasn't made known. All he did was say, I'm representing my constituents and they want me to vote against this. So I think of all of the people that voted against it, I don't blame him at all. But the ones that actually spoke out against it and sounded like complete idiots doing it, yeah, they have problems. So yeah, I'm going to wrap this thing up. Great discussion, guys. And if you have any questions or anything else like that, feel free to throw them in the comments. I'll see them eventually. Otherwise, cheers. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. And next week will be, I think next week I'm also off my Facebook ban, so I'll probably start streaming to Facebook again too, in addition to this. But next week is the last week of the month. That means there's no government meetings. All that gets taken care of in the first 3 weeks. So next week is going to be like freewheeling, freeform Friday. and we'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. So definitely send questions and comments about, and definitely get in like the comments section, give your own thoughts. Maybe I said something tonight that you were like, that was a really stupid thing that you said, and this is why I think it was stupid. I love stuff like that. I do better with criticism than I do with compliments. Like, I get a lot of compliments and I'm just like, well, thanks, but I don't really know like how to take that. But I mean, if you want to let me know how stupid and what a dumbass I am, I love it. So yeah, just let me know, and next weekend we'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, because that's how we do it. All right. Yes, Brock, have a great weekend yourself, dude. All right, guys, I'm out. Have a great weekend. Bye.